Thanks everyone. So I'm James Thompson. I'm head of digital engineering for Gammon Construction. So obviously Gammon is a main contractor in Hong Kong. So I've been with Gammon for about 18 months or so now, but my background is actually in BIM management actually. So I was one of the original cohort on the BRE BIM sort of training, I guess, and from about 2012-13 onwards, I've been seeing different levels of BIM within different companies, and sort of sitting client side, consultant side, and now contractor side. It's very interesting to sort of understand actually what BIM is and what people's interpretation of it is, and actually trying to drive efficiency from it in order to make ourselves more profitable as a business, essentially. So the sort of the first question, and I think Emilio kind of answered it in a really great way. You know, what is BIM? And my sort of interpretation really of BIM, or certainly what I've seen in Hong Kong over the past 18 months or so, is really we focus a lot of effort on delivering the graphical model. You can see there that there's two examples, so AIA at the top and the UK's publicly available specification 1192. So you can see there that they're all based on the graphical information, but either differs because of the amount of detail it's got graphically, or they're trying to align the graphical output to the construction process, essentially, or the construction stage in the bottom one's instance. So all very graphical, and really what I'm trying to get at in my presentation today is that we're not going to talk about a 3D model at all. We're going to talk about information management, information process, and how to drive business change through digital transformation. So the first thing that we did at Gammon was we needed to establish that it was a business priority, and it needs to be treated like a transformation program. So this is not an add-on. It's not something you give to another team. It should transform the whole business and the way we deliver projects. So it's championed at Exco level all the way through the business. And the majority of projects that we have within the business at the minute have some BIM, varying levels of it, but now the focus is better information management, essentially. So trying to establish what the pain points were for us. We, as Emilio was saying, we produce 3D models, but we build from drawings. Everybody sees BIM as an extra. And it's quite interesting to see Hong Kong's interpretation of BIM as being that modeling element. Construction is still one of the most dangerous occupations. It's barely changed over the past hundreds of years. I'd probably say more than that, actually, as conservative. Clients often want the cheapest solution. So just because it's cheaper doesn't mean that it's better value. So cost versus the value. The supply chain's maturity. So in a lot of countries where BIM is pretty mature, the supply chain tend to take on a lot of the responsibility for producing the information. So for instance, we as a main contractor, we take on all the BIM modeling works from the consultants when we've got to build it. Whereas if you looked at another industry such as the UK, for instance, they're more of a management contractor, so they would manage the output of the supply chain, thus not needing such a heavy BIM team. And finally, construction is a dirty, horrible, messy industry, and unfortunately, it doesn't attract the best talent and the best skill sets or mindsets. So we're dealing with quite a different digital transformation to other industries like finance and banking here. So these are all the challenges, or some of them at varying levels. And then I think it's also worth looking at what what our clients are asking for. So this is Development Bureau. You can see there that the amount of information that we've got to deliver as a contractor just goes up and up year on year on year. So we can't afford to go at a slow speed anymore. We have to keep beating this baseline information or this benchmark each time. And you can see over the past 3 years that actually now we've got across the design, the construction and the feasibility, we've now got 27 mandatory fields or uses for BIM modeling. So looking at construction industry benchmarking, you can see that productivity. So this is quite an old chart on the left hand side, and actually this is a global chart. But what you can see is that construction is pretty flat, but an industry like manufacturing has managed to double its productivity per dollar value, essentially. And then looking at the right side, you can see Hong Kong, in terms of construction productivity, is one of the most expensive places to construct in the world. And actually, we're not delivering the productivity increases that digital transformation should yield. So what we did as a business is we focused on getting a strategy in place to integrate the digital tools that we have. And then we broke it up into 3 areas. So the people, the processes and the technology. And really all of those come into contact with BIM. But the one I'm going to talk about today is the processes. So I'm sure everybody's seen this chart before. This is, there's hundreds of pieces of BIM software out there. And they're all great at doing individual bits and pieces on a project. But what does that look like in terms of how do I deliver a project and what software do I need at what time? So the first thing that we did was consolidation. So what do we need to have a constructed, a connected construction site? And how do we piece all these bits of software into our process, essentially? So we looked at a lot of different buzzwords and different innovation initiatives that were going on within the business, and essentially boiled it down into 3 sections. So the first one being the digital project information. So that's things like what Emilio was on about earlier, about the the data element of it and how we can more efficiently produce BIM information. And then the second part then is how can we repurpose that information to actually do the construction? So can we get rid of a drawing, or could we push the data through to some automated equipment? Or can we plan our logistics better? All of that is drawing down on this digital project information. So the primary focus is to get the foundation right in the digital project information in order to yield the benefit within the digital project delivery. And then as a business, what we're doing is we're drawing down on all of these projects, and we're bringing it back to center, really, to learn from our mistakes and improve our construction techniques, and actually relay real-time data in order to drive insights within the business. So that was the high-level strategy. And we had so many different platforms that what we needed to do is we needed to bring it back to a central place. So we call it the IDPD portal, but essentially we can pull everybody's user experience is the same, and they only go to one individual place. So in terms of trying to improve process at its lowest level, it's not jumping between different pieces of software. It's trying to go to a familiar place where everybody knows how to use it, regardless of what project they're on or what piece of software it is. So it looks very complicated, but this was where we were, and essentially trying to piece together all of the pieces of software, all the standards into an end-to-end process. So design, planning, procurement, construction stage, FM, all the way through, and trying to transition into this integrated construction. And actually, we were quite fortunate that ISO 19650 came out. Actually, this is probably one of the most useful charts, but probably the most overlooked one, which is trying to establish what your business requirements are, what your information requirements are, your technology ones and your standards ones. So in here, I'll just show you what we have at each layer and how we got there. So just focusing on the business layer first. So as a business, we wanted to drive data within the business automatically in order to get insights that we can act on. Businesses which tend to have a higher innovation rate or better innovations tend to be more profitable. So we wanted to foster an innovative culture. Not only that, obviously COVID at the minute is probably testament to it, but we needed to connect and collaborate, and not only that, we need to co-author and co-create things together. So not just in Revit, but in Office 365, or being able to access the files on a CDE, essentially being able to make the data accessible from anywhere at any time by the right person. And then finally, we are a business and we need to increase the productivity. So the key driver for us is to harness the technological benefit that we have now in order to drive productivity and increase efficiency within the business. So this is just a simple diagram, but within this, it's quite clear what we actually needed to do. When you strip away all the fancy 3D modeling, all of the buzzwords and DFMA and everything else, what we need to do is we need to collect information either by an action of a person or by a sensor. And then we need to push that data using some kind of connectivity. So in this instance, 5G back to a data center. And then we need to warehouse it to sort it out. And then we need to drive business intelligence from it. And once we've done that process, we can then feed the information back to the common data environment for the project teams to use it, and also for the applications to draw down on those data sets. So essentially, we go around this cycle every time, regardless of whether it's a hand key or a drawing or a specification or an email. It doesn't matter. All project information follows a similar loop. And this allows us to do the check and balance on information. So we can check what was planned versus what actually was constructed. Or we could check how much we were going to pay for something versus how much we actually paid for it. So it's got lots and lots of uses. And then we needed to define what our information layers were. So who needs what information at what level, basically. So if we take, I don't know, let's say a hand key for this, at the lowest level, you might want to see who's on site. At the next level, you might want to see how many from a particular subcontractor are on site. And then above you, in level 4, you might want to see for that week how many people turned up to site, and what did they actually do. At level 3, you probably want to know across all the projects how many people from that subcontractor turned up on our sites. At the second level, we probably want to know, okay, this amount of people turned up at our sites, how much are we going to pay them? And then at the group level, we might want to see, okay, we've got an aging demographic of people turning up at our sites. There's a risk or to identify a business decision that needs to be made about that data that we've collected. So it's really, really important that we understand what we need at each level, and defining this information layer has actually been a really critical process for us to try and drive the change. Because without collecting a small piece of data at the bottom consistently across the whole business, we can't get the insight at the highest level. So it's really, really fundamental to have that. And then coming back to a more information management perspective, the chart on the bottom left-hand side is actually from ISO 19650. So essentially, we know we have to work in this 4-box method to achieve a common data environment. But actually, how do you do that? And I think a step that everybody misses, but actually quite a lot of large Hong Kong clients are driving into their projects, is naming something the correct way and making sure that you stick to the naming of that in order to drive the automation on the project. So, for instance, this is an example of a large Hong Kong government client, and essentially they want you to name it, so the project number, the originator, the level, zone, the discipline, and then the number. But within businesses, up to about 20 odd % of time, people spend hunting for the information. So even if you can improve the way that you save it and the way it's named, potentially you're looking at an upside of around that number, just from naming it correctly, and that's before all the automation. The second part then is, once I've got all this information, what can I automatically generate? And I think when we look at CDEs, everybody thinks about ProjectWise or BIM 360 or Aconex is going to do it for me. But actually the fundamental part of the CDE is not the software. So what is the approval process? What are the workflows? What do I need? What, when, and why, essentially. And really it's the dirty, non-sexy looking things which drive the efficiency in the common data environment. And this is just an example of a process which we're doing in one of our projects here, which is all about who reviews, who authorizes, who checks, and how we can automate the state and the statuses of information, regardless of whether it's a drawing, a specification, or a letter. It could be anything, but everything is managed in the same way. And if you notice, there's no even regardless if it's a 3D model, it still goes through the same process. So information management, absolutely key, and absolutely key to have this standard. One thing that we have started to do now is trying to come up with some internal standards and some internal policies to try and standardize projects across the business. So now we have really, really strong ties with the innovation teams and the projects and operations teams to drive the what went well, what didn't go so well, back into the standards. So these are very relevant now. And actually, it's a critical part of standardizing the projects across the business. But really, BIM for us now is less about the 3D modeling and more about the information management in the back end. And then something which was touched on a bit with the BOM earlier was about the data and the metadata. I think it's also worthwhile noting as well that regardless of what platform you're using or what system, you can attach a lot of useful information to it. So for instance, if you wanted to know, search for a claim reference, or when something was issued, or what it was issued for, or when it was opened, all of that information can be added to pretty much any file type now. So don't rely on the model. If the contract is calling for outputs which are non-model related, you can still work in a better information management process. You don't have to be dictated by a Revit model, essentially. And then something which I think we're all familiar with, and certainly I'm familiar with recently, is how do we transit the information from being project information to being asset information? So this is a really useful slide, which I don't think a lot of people even know exists, but in BS 8536, there's a section in there which outlines some key criteria or requirements or activities actually which need to be fulfilled in order to hand over the asset information. And a lot of these are regularly missed from clients' specifications, and they often lead into grey areas within the projects. So it's worth having a look at that and getting your head around it, because actually what we produce at the beginning has a significant impact into how good the quality of the information is we hand over at the end. And then this is a a really big topic, and I think diversity is going to become more of a topic in construction. So as we get different genders, we get different age groups, different generations, different cultures, and even risks like COVID, our roles continue to change. So if you came to the office and you were a draftsman and drawing in AutoCAD all day, you're not going to be doing that for the whole of your career. So essentially, we need to keep changing and keep evolving. But not only that, we need to make sure that we're supporting the people, because ultimately the people are the business. The software can support us, but actually the training and the skilling of the people is probably our number one priority to try and improve the way that we can deliver projects. And all of these challenges are just what make it interesting. So I'll just try and wrap up. So what is BIM? Hopefully my view or my presentation has hopefully changed your mind away from it being a 3D model, because it's much more about information management. And I think it's more of this. So it's more of connected construction. So how do we connect different data sets to a central source and manage it in a standardized and methodical manner? And then how can we bring those benefits of the construction and the information that we attach to those assets and push it onto authorities and owner operators so they can yield the benefits of construction as well? And I'll just finish off with sort of 5 lessons learned that I just want to share with the group, which is it's really important to set out. So forget the 3D model. It's really, really important to have interoperable data and standardize what you are doing, because that gives you the opportunity to automate a lot. If you don't standardize it and you don't test it, it's really, really difficult to deliver. Try and use sensors over human input. The data is much better. On average, we're getting about 92% efficiency on a human, whereas 100% on a sensor, obviously. Try and centralize the data. So if your project hasn't got a CDE on it and you're saying it's a BIM project, I'd argue it's not a BIM project. But ultimately, you'll be able to get analytics from it to see where you're not doing so well or where you're doing really well. The training is probably the number one thing. But the last one, there's no single job for life, sort of embrace the change. That's the critical thing. It's really, really about pushing learning new things and pushing the dynamics of teams to drive the efficiencies in the project.